What if I told you that a significant portion of what you want was put into your head by people who knew exactly what they were doing? What if I told you that a considerable amount of how you feel about any given thing was exactly how they want you to feel? Here's the truth behind the conspiracy theories, the subtle way that each and every one of us is being influenced. There's this question that I keep coming back to. How much of our nature is human nature? There's these two messages that we receive in my experience in the English-speaking world from the news media and Hollywood and so on. On one level, a subtle level, we're told what's right. We're told what's right to want, what and who it's right to love, and what it's right to think and feel about a given thing. To some extent, this reflects the forever changing sentiments towards a particular issue in a society at a given time. Gender issues and sexuality of late are seeing a welcome change in tone and an increase in representation for minorities and marginalized groups. One troubling undercurrent in how so much of our capitalist consumption culture has taken shape is, to paraphrase Isaiah Berlin, paternalism. Those with considerable influence over society have taken it upon themselves to worm tentacles into the thinking of the average person. These people have endeavored to make us want what they think we should want. They have endeavored to make us live in a way that they think we should want to live in, as if one day we'll all turn around and thank them for doing us a favor. You can see this in the ideas of Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, who I talked about in a previous video. He liked Freud's idea that there's this dark force inside all of us that needs to be tamed, else it will wreak havoc on society. As far as I understand it, Bernays saw us humans as creatures that needed to be controlled for our own good, lest we wreck this good thing we have. If you think about it, there's something quite Christian about that. Being born inherently sinful and needing to have our desires curtailed so that we can eventually be transmuted into some exalted form of ourselves. Something which, according to a select few wise individuals, can and will be possible as long as we live exactly as they say we should. And there's a crossover there with cults as well. There's an air of mystical manipulation about all of this. That's the thinking behind this subtle and subliminal message that we're all receiving. And you spend any amount of time watching the news or any Hollywood film and you'll see it. It's in the subtle gestures, in the assumptions made, in the things that aren't said. You don't often notice what's not there, right? Because it's not there, but it's what's missing that paints a telling picture about the assumptions, the values, the intentions of the person that created the thing. The subjective world that they live in within their own head and the ways in which they would like that to influence the world outside of it. All of this, I think, is an extension of this earlier cause, along with the expected agendas and biases that we all unknowingly or knowingly embed in the things that we create. There is, however, this presumptive assertion that's made by someone somewhere, a presumptive assertion that says that they know what we want or need better than we do. Whether or not they do will be varying levels of right or wrong depending on the issues at hand and the myriad of blind spots that each person has and the various biases that apply to the issue. But it's the arrogance, this grandioseness that bothers me. The video's not over yet, we're actually about to really get into this, but if you want to see more videos from me about critical thinking, destructive cults and life after the new age, then why not subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. So on the one hand, we have this subtle programming that's targeting our deepest wants and needs. And then on the other, we get this sort of overt programming that kind of emboldens us. Especially from the American media, you hear things like freedom is your right, a sentiment which has been turned to somewhat imperialistic ends in our lifetime. And we hear things like, you're free to want what you want, you deserve the life of your dreams, just work hard and you'll get it. We're told in no uncertain terms that we have the power to choose what we want. We're told that what we want matters most in life, and we're told that we're special and that we matter just because we exist. There's this intense individualism, this push to make your mark on the world and leave a legacy behind. Of course, there's a sliding scale of correctness there, but the two messages, when heard together, take on this insidious tone for me. If you subtly condition a population into thinking that certain things matter and other things don't, and then bombard them with messages of purchasing power and personal freedom, those very people could become unwitting agents, furthering a cause that they're not aware of. They play into the hands of the self-serving individuals who are quite happy to let them go about and feel free and significant while they mess up the planet. And the population? Blind participants sold on how free they are. And our natural predisposition towards tribalism feeds into this too. Social policing becomes the vehicle by which unexamined and potentially destructive things like tradition and traditional values are given power and perpetuated. I think if we want to break this pattern and stop playing into it all, then I think it's going to be a deeply personal thing. I think it's going to be an introspective process. It's about filtering out those things in your social self which have been planted there by self-serving individuals solely for their own ends. Not necessarily to eradicate anything, but to make informed decisions possible with regards to political leanings and purchasing power and our own personal values and so on. How we each go about this, I think, is our prerogative. For me, as a skeptic, it's about critical thinking, I think, and for me that is very quickly becoming an imperative. If you agree with me on that, by the way, hit the like button and let me know. And when I'm talking about things that have been conditioned into us, I'm talking about something like the desire to buy something purely for the benefit of social standing, or unexamined values that have been socialized into us by the cultures we happen to have been born into, or the inherited parameters for goodness and virtue. I think these things deserve to be examined as part of a delicate and thoughtful evaluation of our received acceptance of how things are. But as we begin to discard the useless and the damaging and the things that are only in our heads because they serve some people that put them there, we might start to notice a few gaps in our beliefs, in our values, in our ideas. In those cases, I find myself turning to science and the latest evidence on a given issue. I try to let the current least wrong answer inform my opinion, but I do my best to always do that in a way that doesn't fail to take into account a fundamental baseline of kindness and respect for humanity as a whole. There's an important caveat here, I think. As far as I'm concerned, kindness and respect is incomplete if it doesn't afford each individual autonomy in the pursuit of what they personally think is important, whether or not unconsidered or destructive social programming has been filtered out. For me, kindness and respect are two of the most important things, and if I'm failing to be kind, if I'm failing to be respectful, I'm making a mistake and I need to check in with myself. Even if the current evidence could lead me to a conclusion that makes me feel like I'm better than someone else or someone else is bad or less than in some way, I always do my best to avoid thinking that way. And if I do find myself thinking that way, then that has got to go under the microscope too. No stone unturned. Sometimes when we turn to science for greater understanding or to inform our opinions, we might find that there is little to no evidence to support any position that a person might take on a given issue. This is particularly an issue when it comes to new and prevalent social issues which just don't have the evidence to support any positions on them yet. In which case I think that tells us that we can't have an informed opinion on certain issues unless we're willing to lower the bar on what we're willing to consider is an informed opinion. And if that bar gets too low, then we run the risk of developing opinions more often based on things like false consensus bias and other cognitive distortions and biases that all of us fall prey to. But we shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking that science is free from biases and distortions. It's not. While the scientific method is a self-correcting method, to my knowledge, it has historically been the breeding ground for as many biases as we humans are capable of, and vulnerable to, I should add. What I'm suggesting here is a reserved approach to opinion forming wherein we withhold our beliefs unless we have evidence for them. We might even find it possible to take delight in the discomfort of being wrong rather than doubling down. I don't have enough information to have an informed opinion about that is an acceptable answer to the question, what do you think? Part of this might be finding ways to extricate our sense of who we are from particularly unhelpful, deeply held opinions or beliefs. To perhaps think of ourselves more in terms of those things that matter most to us, or things that we think are particularly important or virtuous. If we're able to distance ourselves from the tangled web of opinions and beliefs, if only for a moment sometimes, then we might find it easier to examine long-held beliefs, and we might find it easier to figure out whether or not they're worth holding on to. And where we're concerned more with comfort or peace of mind rather than what may ultimately be a search in vain for some kind of immutable truth, then I think it's worthwhile turning to rationality, but rationality with a touch of whimsy, an exploration of what might be possible. And if we can allow our minds to wander a little bit without slipping into anxious thought, then I think we'd be remiss if we didn't let ourselves play a little bit at the frontier of what we know is possible. Of course, all of that goes without saying that it is almost always usually worth being kind and asking good questions. I'm Andy Fellows, and I'll see you in the next one.